Now, objection number 10 goes like this. Free grace believes a person can apostatize or fall away from the Christian faith and still be saved. Well, first we need to try to understand and determine whether the person that is in view understood and believed the biblical gospel. It's possible that some people who fall away from the Christian faith or appear to completely reject the Christian faith, it's possible they were just professing Christians and never were saved. So we always have to hold out for that possibility because it is true sometimes. However, the scripture has examples of believers who fell away from the faith with no evidence that they were never saved or lost their salvation. For example, Solomon. Solomon at the end of his life married all these women and became an idolater. And yet he wrote books of scripture, and he was a descendant of David, and he was in many ways favored by God. It is very difficult to prove that he lost or never had salvation. And then in the New Testament, you have a number of examples like Ananias and Sapphira, who lied, obviously wrong, but they were immediately disciplined with physical death. Or Hymenaeus and Alexander in 1 Timothy, who shipwrecked their faith. And there were others who loved this world and deserted Paul. Many examples of those who fell away from the faith and never any evidence that they were never saved. And I wrote a Grace Notes on this, number 55, called The Christian in Apostasy, which you can look up on the website, Grace Notes number 55. You also have to deal with the book of Hebrews, which warns of severe consequences for believers who fall away from the faith. Now, some people interpret Hebrews differently and think that it's a book that is warning non-Christians that they need to believe, and I reject that interpretation. See my Grace Notes number 15 on interpreting Hebrews, beginning with the readers. When you look at the readers of Hebrews, you'll see that they're definitely Christians. They were in danger of turning back to Judaism and falling away from the Christian faith. And the book of Hebrews gives 5 severe warnings to those who would neglect their faith or fall away from their faith. And those warnings involve perhaps temporal judgments in this life that are very severe, as well as a loss of reward in the future life. So, another response to this objection that we say a Christian can apostatize and fall away from faith and still be saved is that grace covers every sin. And apostasy is a terrible sin. Rejecting Jesus Christ after knowing him is a terrible sin, but it is a possibility. But the grace of God covers every sin. And the scriptures teach in Romans chapter 5 that where sin abounded, grace abounded much more. If salvation can't be earned by what we do and what we don't do, it can't be lost by what we do or don't do. And even if someone no longer believes, the scriptures teach that God is faithful to his promise to save us. God is not a liar. He cannot deny himself. And even when we are faithless, he remains faithful, 2 Timothy 2:13. And that is spoken in the context of our salvation. So when we are faithful or unbelieving, when we cease to believe, God is still faithful to his promises. He can't deny himself. So we do not teach that a person who falls away from the church, falls away from the faith, falls away from Christ, loses their salvation or never was saved. We hold out the possibility that perhaps they were never saved. But we believe that free grace theology teaches that no sin is too great for God's grace, and even if someone were to not deny the faith, that they could remain saved. They will remain saved if they were saved to begin with.